Johnny Depp never liked the cold brightness of TV studio corridors. Too sterile, too fake. But that night, he stepped through the side door of 30 Rockefeller Plaza like a man trying to stitch his name back together, piece by piece. He was 59 then, hair pulled back under a soft fedora, lines around his eyes carved deeper by headlines that never seemed to sleep. A week before, an assistant producer from The Tonight Show had called him at an impossible hour. Her voice trembled just enough to sound real. "Jimmy wants you back on the couch, Johnny. The world wants to see you laugh again." Johnny didn't laugh when he hung up. He just stared at the wall in his rented hotel suite, remembering how easily the world could clap for you one year and spit on your name the next. He said yes anyway, because sometimes the only way to shut up the ghosts was to walk straight into the lights. Tonight, backstage felt like a church before a storm. Too quiet, too many people pretending they weren't eavesdropping when he passed. A young crew member, Mike Carver, 27, new to the job and hungry for scraps of gossip, watched Johnny from behind a stack of prop crates. He'd grown up with Pirates posters on his wall, his mother quoting Edward Scissorhands when she cut his hair. He didn't know what to expect tonight. Just that the rumor mill said Jimmy Fallon had a plan, a gotcha surprise to boost ratings and drag Johnny's name back through the mud one last time. Mike wasn't supposed to know, but secrets in these halls had paper-thin walls. Johnny sat alone in his dressing room, jacket draped over the chair, staring at the blue cue cards with a pen tapping his knee. He didn't see Mike watching from the cracked door, didn't see Jimmy Fallon in the hallway, whispering with his segment producer about the final bit. If Mike Carver was honest, he should have looked away. Should have minded his own business, like everyone else who came here hoping for a paycheck and a selfie with fame. But he didn't. Mike Carver tried to slip away when he heard Jimmy's voice echoing down the hallway. But the studio's old floors squeaked like they were built to betray secrets. He ducked behind a rolling wardrobe rack just as Jimmy Fallon rounded the corner, his trademark grin flickering in and out of the harsh overhead light. Jimmy's laugh was softer off camera, not the booming, goofy bark that kept millions glued to their screens every weeknight. Off stage, it sounded more like a test, a sound that waited to see if you'd join in, just to prove you were safe. Beside him was Trevor, the segment producer, all black turtleneck and wireframe glasses, clutching a clipboard like it held the key to the kingdom. "We just slide it in at the end," Trevor was whispering. "Right after you bring up the comeback joke. Then boom, audience eats it up. He can't back out on live TV." Jimmy's grin twitched. "We sure legal's good with this? The last thing I need is his people breathing down my neck." Trevor shrugged. "Ratings are down, Jimmy. They want something viral. Nobody wants to see Johnny Depp just talk about his band. They want something real. You give them that, they'll clip it 1,000,000 times by breakfast." Mike's stomach dropped. He knew what they were planning. The rumor had been slithering through the lighting crew all week. An old video, out of context, twisted just enough to light the internet on fire again. Johnny wouldn't see it coming. They'd frame it as a fun surprise, play it off like a joke. Mike peered through the gap in the coats, saw Jimmy tug at his suit cuff, eyes darting to Johnny's dressing room door, just 20 feet away. "Make sure the clip's cued," Jimmy murmured, smoothing his hair back. "If he walks, we own the narrative." The hallway went silent again after they slipped down the stairs to the control room. Mike stayed frozen behind the rack, mind racing. He wasn't a hero. He barely had his name stitched on his staff pass. He could stay out of it. He should stay out of it. But then he pictured Johnny, the man sitting in that room alone, rehearsing jokes about pirate ships and guitars, trusting someone in this building to keep the knives out of his back. Mike swallowed the lump in his throat. Sometimes a person spends their whole life invisible. Then a moment comes along that asks if you're willing to risk everything just to be seen. He stepped out from the rack and turned toward Johnny's door, one trembling fist raised to knock. Johnny Depp didn't look up right away when Mike Carver's hesitant knock rattled the dressing room door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old leather and stale coffee. A guitar leaned in the corner, a small comfort Johnny insisted on whenever he was forced back under bright studio lights. He sat at the vanity, watching his own eyes in the mirror like they belonged to someone else. Mike knocked again, heart pounding. He wondered what he'd say if Johnny actually opened the door. "Hey, I'm nobody, but I think they're about to humiliate you on live TV." The door creaked open an inch. Johnny's assistant, a wiry man named Rick, eyed Mike like he was about to toss him back out into the hallway. "Can I help you?" Rick asked, voice flat as a dead line on a monitor. Mike cleared his throat. I need to talk to Mr. Depp. Just a minute. Rick's eyes narrowed. About what? Johnny's voice drifted from inside, rough but calm. Rick, who is it? Rick stepped aside, reluctantly. And there he was, the man Mike had watched in movies since he was 12, staring at him now with an unreadable expression. Mike's throat went dry. Sorry, sir. I shouldn't bother you. It's just… Johnny raised a hand, silencing the apology before it bloomed. He gestured to the second chair by the mirror. Sit. Talk. Mike sank into the chair, the fabric squeaking under his weight. He felt stupid in his cheap crew jacket, knees bouncing up and down. They're planning something, he blurted out. Jimmy, the producers. They're gonna play this old clip, something that makes you look bad. They're calling it spontaneous. But they've got it ready to roll right at the end so you can't walk. Rick bristled. You got proof, kid? Mike shook his head. Just what I heard. But I swear it's real. I worked the side stage screens. They told me to patch the feed through. They said if you get angry, it's good TV. Johnny's eyes didn't flicker. He just leaned back, exhaled through his nose like a man who'd smelled this kind of ambush before. Thank you, Mike, Johnny said quietly. 2 words that felt like a rope thrown to a drowning man. Mike opened his mouth to say something to apologize, maybe. But Johnny just patted his knee twice, then looked at Rick. Get me my phone. And call legal. Mike sat frozen as Rick hustled out. Johnny's gaze drifted back to the mirror, the same tired eyes staring back, except now, just for a moment, there was a flicker of something sharper underneath. Johnny Depp hadn't survived decades in Hollywood by being easy to corner. This time, the trap was about to snap shut on the wrong man. Rick returned with Johnny's phone, the bright screen illuminating the lines in his palm like a roadmap of places he'd rather forget. Johnny scrolled through his contacts, thumb hovering, then tapped a name Mike couldn't see. He pressed the phone to his ear, staring at his reflection as though daring it to blink first. Brenda? Yeah, it's me, he murmured, voice low enough that Mike had to lean in to catch each word. Listen, I need a favor. There's gonna be a clip, Fallon's people. Get someone inside NBC legal, fast. I want to know who signed off. And if it runs, I want the contract pulled. Yeah, tonight. Rick crossed his arms by the door, scanning the hall for eavesdroppers. Mike just sat there, palms sweaty on his knees. He'd done his part, hadn't he? He should leave. But some invisible thread pinned him to that cheap green room chair. Johnny ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and turned to Mike with a ghost of a smile. You got guts, kid, he said. Most people here see the bear trap. They walk right past it. Let the poor fool step in. Mike shifted under the weight of it. I just didn't want to watch them screw you over. I mean, you're Johnny Depp. Johnny's laugh was soft but genuine, the kind that lived far away from talk shows and clickbait. Once upon a time, maybe that meant something. He stood, shrugged on his jacket, then turned back to Mike, eyes sharp again. You ever want out of this circus? Johnny said, voice almost conspiratorial. You call Rick. He'll find you something better. Mike almost laughed, a gig with Johnny Depp's team? But the moment didn't linger. Johnny was already stepping to the mirror, fixing his hat, like a soldier polishing his armor before battle. From the hallway came the distant roar of the crowd as the house band kicked into gear. Fallon's voice rolling through the studio, bigger than life, dripping charm. Johnny glanced once at Mike before pushing open the door. Showtime, he said. And just like that, the man was gone. A legend walking straight into the trap, armed with nothing but calm eyes and an inconvenient truth. Mike rose, heart pounding, half expecting Rick to shove him out, but Rick just jerked his head toward the door. Come on, hero, he muttered. If you're in this deep, you're seeing it through. In the hall, the shadows of 100 grinning posters watched them pass. Johnny Depp, Jimmy Fallon, perfect smiles frozen in time. Tonight, one of those smiles was about to crack wide open. The studio lights hit Johnny like a slap of winter air. Mike watched from the wings, hidden behind a tangle of camera cables and board interns pretending not to listen. Out there, the world only saw the grin, Johnny's crooked, dangerous charm that made you lean in, made you forgive the rumors. The applause was thunder. Fallon's arms wide open, a big goofy welcome that reeked of fake warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, Johnny Depp. The crowd roared louder. Johnny stepped forward, hat in hand like a gentleman pirate who'd traded his ship for a second chance. Mike's stomach twisted when he spotted the tiny red cue light flicker on by the side stage. That meant the secret clip was armed, waiting for Jimmy's nod. Fallon leaned across the desk, teeth gleaming under the studio glow. "Johnny, my man, it's been way too long. Look at you. The band's still together, huh?" Johnny just nodded, that half-smile dancing at the edge of his mouth. "For my sins, yeah." Laughter rippled through the audience. "Safe, easy." Fallon drummed his fingers on the desk, eyes flicking sideways to Trevor, who gave a subtle thumbs up behind the camera. "So," Jimmy said, voice dipping just enough to sound conspiratorial, "I hear there's a, let's say, interesting little moment from the past we should clear up tonight. You mind if I show the folks at home?" Johnny leaned back in his chair. His fingers drummed the armrest once, twice. Calm. Controlled. "Depends, Jimmy," he drawled, eyes never leaving Fallon's. "You show me yours first, maybe I'll show you mine." The audience laughed. They thought it was a joke. Mike knew better. He saw Fallon's grin twitch, just for a heartbeat. Jimmy gestured offstage. The floor director threw a signal. The screens behind the desk flickered to life, a grainy freeze frame. Johnny's face from a decade ago, mid-argument, mid-scandal, mid-internet fodder. The crowd sucked in a breath. Some clapped, confused, waiting to see if they should laugh or gasp. Mike held his own breath. This was it. The gotcha. Johnny just stared at the screen, then back at Fallon, his smile now razor-thin. "You want to talk about old ghosts, Jimmy?" he said, voice low enough that the first few rows leaned in, hooked like fish. Fallon laughed, forced, eyes darting to the control room glass, where Trevor's face was already pale. Johnny leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Roll it, then," he said. "Let's show him all of it. Not just the piece you cut for clicks." Mike felt the shift in the room. The audience sensed it too. The air crackled with the promise that maybe, just maybe, they were about to see a man fight back in real time. Johnny Depp, cornered on live TV, and suddenly, not the prey. The clip rolled, but Johnny's eyes didn't waver. He watched his own younger face frozen in low-res shame, the tabloid headline practically stamped across the screen for everyone to gawk at. The audience tensed. Some leaned back, eyes darting between the screen and Johnny's calm stare. Fallon shifted in his chair, drumming his pen on the desk, a little faster now, smile tightening at the corners. Mike's palms were slick with sweat. He felt Rick's hand land on his shoulder, a silent anchor keeping him rooted backstage. "Isn't it funny?" Johnny said, voice cutting through the giggles and coughs like a knife through silk. "How a man can live 20,000 days, but people only care about one." Fallon laughed, but the sound cracked halfway through. "Well, you know, it's all in good fun." Johnny leaned in, voice steady, eyes locked on Jimmy's. "You want to talk about fun? Let's talk about context. Let's talk about who cut the other 40 seconds out of that clip. The part where I was trying to protect someone who didn't want their life turned into late-night bait." He gestured to the audience, like inviting them into the conversation. "See, folks, when you cut the tape just right, you can turn anyone into a monster. But truth's funny that way, it doesn't care what the edit wants." Fallon's cue cards drooped in his hand. The band sat frozen behind him. A producer offstage whispered frantically into a headset, but Jimmy's earpiece must have been dead or worse. Johnny had hijacked the moment. The clip froze, a muted image hanging behind them like a ghost that had lost its teeth. Johnny turned to the cameras, speaking past Fallon now, straight into the millions watching at home. His voice softened, almost too soft for TV mics, yet every word hit clear. "I'm not perfect. Never claimed to be. But I've survived this town because I know one thing. You can only bury the truth so deep before it digs itself back up." A hush fell over the audience. Some people clapped, unsure. Others just stared, spellbound, waiting for the next swing. Fallon fumbled for a joke, some lifeline to pull the segment back to safe, silly banner. But Johnny leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Anyway, Jimmy," he said, voice like a match flicked against dry kindling, "what were you saying about my band?" Mike could feel it. The room had shifted. Fallon, king of polite, viral banter, had just become the punchline on his own stage. And Johnny Depp, cornered a moment ago, now owned every single heartbeat in that room. Jimmy Fallon's laugh returned, brittle, overcooked. It bounced off the studio walls but landed nowhere. The audience sat in that tight, uncomfortable hush that live TV producers fear most, silence. Mike could see it in Jimmy's eyes, the scramble for a way out. His fingers drummed the desk like a bad snare roll. Somewhere offstage, Trevor the producer was mouthing frantic words through the control room glass. Too late. Johnny just raised an eyebrow, that pirate grin barely there. "Flashbacks are fine, Jimmy, if you show the whole film." Otherwise, it's not nostalgia. It's bait. A ripple of uneasy laughter from the back rows. Even the band was shifting in their seats, horns lowered, eyes flicking between host and guest like a tennis match. Jimmy cleared his throat, shuffled his blue cue cards, grasping for neutral ground. So, the Hollywood vampires, right? You're still touring? That's great. That's great. How's Joe Perry doing? Johnny leaned back, letting the moment breathe, like a man letting his opponent punch air until they tired themselves out. Joe's fine, he said coolly, playing louder than ever. Probably watching this right now, actually. He glanced at the camera again, a glint in his eye. Hi, Joe. Miss you, mate. A few people laughed, but the warmth in the room was gone. Jimmy chuckled along, sweat dotting his hairline under the bright lights. Yeah, we love Joe. Love the band. Good stuff. Mike stood frozen at the side curtain, heart hammering. He half expected security to appear to haul him out for blowing up the plan. But nobody moved. Everyone was waiting to see if Fallon could wrestle the show back. Johnny leaned forward, drumming the desk with 2 rings. So tell me, Jimmy, since we're reminiscing, got any old clips of yourself we can play next? Or maybe I should have brought one. The audience loved that, a roar of surprised laughter. Fallon's face cracked in a grin, but behind it, Mike saw the tightness around his eyes. Fallon spread his arms, palms out. Hey, look, we're all friends here, right? Johnny Depp, everybody. Applause signs lit up, but the clapping felt forced, an obedient twitch instead of real approval. Johnny just sat there, calm as a storm on the horizon, eyes locked on the man who thought he'd control the moment. And for the first time that night, Jimmy Fallon looked like a guest on his own show. The lights felt hotter than ever. Fallon shifted in his seat, tugging at his suit collar. Somewhere backstage, a floor manager gestured wildly for the band to play him out, but Johnny wasn't done. Mike held his breath. Rick muttered under it. Wait for it. Johnny leaned in, elbows resting on Fallon's shiny oak desk, eyes soft but voice edged with something cold. You know, Jimmy, I've been on a lot of couches. Answered the same 10 questions 100 ways for 1,000 headlines. It's the deal, right? You want to stay alive in this town. You smile. You give him a soundbite. He paused, looking at the crowd. But you never expect it from your own. Fallon tried to laugh it off. Hey, come on, Johnny. We're family here. Late night family. Johnny's smile didn't budge. Family doesn't sell you out for clicks. A hush swept the studio. Even the applause sign seemed to give up. Johnny sat back, hands spread on the desk like he was grounding himself. I remember when this show used to be about making people laugh without tearing someone else apart. Carson, Letterman, they could poke you, but they never cut you open. The audience shifted, torn between loyalty to the brand and the truth burning from Johnny's voice. Fallon's grin cracked. I mean, you know how it is, man. The internet, people want drama. No, Jimmy. Producers want drama. People want truth. They want real stories. Johnny tapped the desk twice. Tap, tap. Like punctuation for a lesson Fallon couldn't dodge. He turned to the camera again. Not Fallon, not the crew. Just the millions watching at home who weren't sure if they were seeing a meltdown or a miracle. If you're gonna roll a man's past on a screen behind him, do it when he's not the only one in the room telling the truth. A smattering of claps rose, hesitant at first, then real. Someone in the third row actually stood up, clapping slow, steady. One by one, the sound caught. Mike felt his throat tighten. A smattering of claps rose, hesitant at first, then real. Someone in the third row actually stood up, clapping slow, steady. One by one, the sound caught. Mike felt his throat tighten. Even Rick's arms were crossed with a ghost of a grin on his face. Backstage, the control room was chaos dressed in business casual. Trevor, the producer with the neat hair and the frayed nerves, barked orders at an intern whose only crime was standing too close. Kill the segment, kill it now, cut to commercial. Trevor hissed, jabbing at the switchboard as if he could unplug Johnny Depp himself. The intern stammered, headset half off. We can't. The feed's locked for the live rep. We have 90 seconds before. Then make it 30, Trevor snapped, eyes flicking to the live monitor where Johnny still sat, unbothered, a quiet storm in a chair meant for polite laughter and party anecdotes. In the wings, Mike felt his phone buzz with a dozen messages, friends asking if he was seeing this, strangers who somehow found his number. The whole machine was grinding its teeth in real time. Rick leaned in close, his voice barely above the buzz of panicked producers. Kid, you good? Mike swallowed. Yeah, I think I just torched my career. Rick snorted. You didn't torch anything. You gave a match to the only guy here with the guts to light it. On stage, Fallon's grin was back but softer, forced into shape like clay that wouldn't hold. Johnny, hey, let's lighten it up. New movie, new music, give us something fun. Huh. Johnny didn't flinch. I'll give you something fun. I'm still standing. That's fun. A ripple of laughter, genuine this time. The audience smelled blood but sided with the wounded lion, not the ringmaster. Trevor slammed his headset down. That's it. Break. Cut the feed. Roll the band. But the band didn't strike up right away. They watched Fallon, watched Johnny. They knew the cue, but they also knew the moment had already slipped beyond Jimmy's grip. Mike peered at the teleprompter screen. A bland joke about pirates and guitar solos, a hasty transition back to safe territory. Johnny just sat there, spinning Fallon's coffee mug slowly between his hands. He didn't look angry. He looked free. Then he did the one thing nobody backstage expected. He stood. A simple, unhurried motion, as if leaving a dinner party a little too early, hat in hand, jacket thrown over one shoulder. Jimmy, he said, voice steady, almost kind. Thanks for having me. Fallon laughed, too loud, too empty. Hey, Johnny Depp, everybody. What a guy. Stick around. But Johnny was already halfway to the side stage, passing Rick, passing Mike, nodding once like a man acknowledging an accomplice who didn't know he'd signed up. And as the lights dimmed for the forced commercial break, the last thing the audience saw was the back of Johnny Depp's hat, walking off a stage that couldn't hold him anymore. The second Johnny stepped off stage, the dam burst behind him. Producers poured from the wings like ants from a kicked nest. Trevor cornered Mike first, finger stabbing the air like a dagger made of corporate panic. Do you have any idea what you've done? Trevor hissed, voice tight enough to snap. His headset bounced against his chest as he gestured wildly at the empty stage. Mike held up his hands, trying to keep his voice even. I didn't do anything. Johnny did what Johnny does. Don't play dumb, kid. Trevor shot back. You got him riled up. What did you tell him backstage? You feeding him lines? Feeding him dirt? Rick stepped between them, calm but immovable. Back off, Trevor. If you're looking for someone to blame, maybe look at the genius who okayed the clip roll without warning. Trevor rounded on Rick, eyes wild. Stay out of this, Rick. This is your fault too. You vouched for him. Rick didn't flinch, and I stand by it. Behind them, the band's instruments clinked as they were hastily packed away. Crew members whispered into radios. The audience milled in the aisles, still buzzing with half-laughs and half-gasps, not sure if they'd seen history or a meltdown. Mike felt the adrenaline ebb into a cold pit in his stomach. So what happens now? He asked, voice quiet. Trevor barked out a mirthless laugh. No? Now we do damage control. We call PR, we cut the replay, we drown it with 100 puppy videos before morning. He jabbed a finger at Mike's chest. And you, if you so much as breathe to a blogger. Rick cut him off. He won't. Trevor glared. He better not. If he wants any shot at working a real show again. Mike swallowed. The threat wasn't empty. The machine always found a way to protect itself. But deep down, part of him didn't care anymore. Because somewhere down that hallway, Johnny Depp, the man he'd thought was just another guest with a name big enough to eclipse the truth, was walking out with his head high. A legend refusing to be fed through the late-night meat grinder one more time. Rick gave Mike's shoulder a quick squeeze. Get your stuff. Meet me out back. Trevor threw his arms in the air. Unbelievable. He's walking him out too. But nobody listened. The camera feeds on the control monitors flicked to static, one by one, Johnny's final words still ringing louder than the show's forced laughter. Mike ducked out, past the fake brick walls and bright bulbs, past the big neon sign that promised laughter but delivered something rawer that night. Outside, the city hummed with its usual secrets. And Mike realized, for the first time in his short career, that maybe burning bridges was the only way to see who would follow you across the fire. Mike stepped into the night air behind the studio, lungs gulping the cool dark like water after a desert. The city noises, a siren blocks away, the rattle of a delivery truck, felt more real than the fake laughter and neon glow he'd left behind. He clutched his backpack to his chest. The exit door thudded shut behind him. For a moment, he stood frozen, half expecting security to drag him back inside. But the alley stayed quiet, except for one figure leaning against a brick wall, half hidden by a flickering streetlight. It was Johnny, hat tipped back, cigarette balanced between two fingers, smoke curling into the humid night. Mike stopped. He almost turned around. This wasn't part of the plan. He didn't have a plan anymore. Johnny looked up, eyes catching the weak light. "You running?" he asked, voice softer than it had been on stage. Mike managed a weak laugh. "Maybe. They want me gone anyway." Johnny chuckled, flicked ash onto the cracked pavement. "They'll get over it. Or they won't." For a heartbeat, Mike felt the urge to apologize. To say I didn't mean for this. But the word stuck, because maybe he had meant for it. Maybe they both had, in their own desperate ways. "You didn't owe me anything," Mike said quietly. I didn't expect you to say all that." Johnny shrugged, eyes distant. "People forget I'm just a man, kid. Not a headline. Not a clip package. Sometimes you gotta remind him." Mike swallowed, the question burning in his chest. "So what now?" Johnny took one last drag, flicked the cigarette into a puddle where it hissed out like a dying secret. He pushed off the wall, walking past Mike with a gentle pat on his shoulder. "Now," Johnny said, glancing back with that crooked grin. "Now you decide if you want to work for them, or for yourself." And then he was gone, slipping into the dark where the cameras couldn't follow. Mike stood alone in the alley, watching the place where Johnny had disappeared. Somewhere inside, the late-night machine kept grinding out jokes. But outside, under the streetlight, the truth lingered like smoke. Mike didn't move for a long time after Johnny vanished into the dark. He just stood there, hugging his bag, trying to figure out what to do next, if there even was a next. The city behind the studio lot felt bigger than it had that morning. He thought about his tiny apartment, the rent overdue. He thought about his mother's voice on the phone, "Play it safe, Michael. Be smart." Tonight hadn't been safe. Maybe it hadn't been smart either. But it felt right. His phone buzzed again, one last vibration in his pocket that snapped him back to reality. He almost didn't answer when he saw Rick's name, but some instinct made him swipe it open. "Kid," Rick said, voice rough but steady. "You outside?" "Yeah." "You alone?" Mike looked around the empty alley, the puddles reflecting that broken streetlight. "Yeah." Rick let out a low breath. "Good. Listen close. You just got a new fan. Or an enemy. Or both." Mike frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you're gonna get a call. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. Some blog, some tabloid, maybe a real paper. They'll want you to spill what Johnny said backstage, what you said, what you did. They'll pay, Mike. They'll promise you everything." Mike pressed his free hand to his forehead. "And if I don't?" Rick's tone softened. "Then you keep your soul. Maybe you burn some bridges, maybe you build new ones. Up to you." The line went quiet for a second, then Rick added, "You did good, kid. Not clean, not easy, but good." Mike felt something in his chest unclench, the first real breath since the curtain fell. He stared at the quiet street. A stray cat slipped past, tail flicking like a question mark. "I don't want their money," Mike said. Rick's chuckle was small but real. "Then you're already ahead of most." A beat. Then Rick said, "Go home. Sleep. You'll know what to do when the call comes." And just like that, the line went dead, but the truth stayed, humming louder than the studio lights ever did. Mike barely slept that night. He lay on the sagging couch in his tiny apartment, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling he'd been meaning to fix. Every time his eyelids drooped, his phone buzzed, notifications piling up like snowdrifts he couldn't shovel away. By dawn, the clips were everywhere. Social feeds, news sites, gossip channels. Johnny Depp calls out Jimmy Fallon live. The moment that silenced late night. Some headlines twisted it. Of course, Johnny's meltdown, Johnny unhinged. But the raw clip told its own story. People were watching it on loop, sharing it, picking sides. Mike's phone rang at 8:07 a.m. Unknown number. He let it ring once, twice. He almost let it die. Then he answered. Mike Collins. The voice was smooth, polite, dripping with PR gloss. "Yeah. Hi, this is Lindsay. I'm with Inside Story. We cover the real angles behind celebrity moments. We were wondering if you'd like to give your side of what happened last night." Mike sat up, pushing his blanket to the floor. "My side?" Lindsay laughed softly, friendly, practiced. "Oh, you know. The inside details. What Johnny said before he went out. What Fallon's people did. How it really felt behind the curtain. Our readers want to hear it from you." Mike squeezed his eyes shut. He could already see the check, rent paid, fridge stocked, calls from other shows. The easy way out. He cleared his throat. "What are you offering?" She didn't miss a beat. 10 grand for an exclusive. 20 if you've got something juicy. No names if you'd rather stay off record. 10 grand. Maybe 20. More money than Mike had ever held at once. He pictured Johnny, calm in that alley, the smoke, the grin. Now you decide if you want to work for them or for yourself. Mike leaned back on the couch, heartbeat thudding. Lindsay, he said, voice steady. I don't think you want my side. A pause. Oh, why's that? Because my side's not for sale. He ended the call before she could answer. He sat there in the morning light, phone warm in his hand, wondering if he'd just made the dumbest or the bravest decision of his life. Mike didn't bother trying to sleep again. He sat at the tiny kitchen table, nursing a stale cup of coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. He scrolled past the headlines, the endless comments. Some called Johnny washed up, some called him a hero. A few called Mike by name. People trying to figure out who he was, what he'd done. A knock rattled his front door just after 9. 3 sharp raps that didn't sound like a neighbor or a delivery guy. Mike froze. He thought about ignoring it, but curiosity tugged him up from the creaking chair. He peeked through the peephole. Rick. Mike unlatched the door, surprised. How do you even know where I live? Rick stepped inside like he'd been there before, scanning the shabby studio apartment with a wry smile. You think the studio didn't run your file when they hired you? They know everything. Where you live, what coffee you drink, who you vote for. Lucky for you. So do I. He dropped a brown paper bag on the table. The smell hit Mike before he could ask. Warm breakfast sandwiches, fresh, the good kind. You didn't have to. Rick waved him off. Eat. You're gonna need it. Mike unwrapped the foil, the steam hitting his face like a small mercy. He took a bite. Real eggs, real cheese, not the dollar menu stuff. Rick sat down across from him, arms folded. I heard about the call. Mike swallowed. I told them no. Rick's eyes crinkled. Good. There's gonna be more. Bigger names. Bigger checks. They'll want you to turn Johnny into the villain of his own story. Mike looked away. Why me? I'm nobody. Rick just smiled. Exactly where he wants to be. Outside the window, the morning sun was burning off the night's leftover haze. Mike realized he'd stepped into a story bigger than any paycheck, and this time, he wasn't alone. The breakfast sandwiches were gone, crumbs scattered across the cheap table. Rick sat back, watching Mike with that half-smirk of his, like he already knew something Mike didn't. Mike wiped his hands on a napkin. So, what now? I'm not exactly anyone important. They'll move on. Rick's eyebrows rose. You think so? You underestimate what a good scandal's worth. Especially when it's got a face behind it, your face. Mike felt a chill in his neck. He wanted to argue, but the truth was there in his phone, messages piling up, numbers he didn't know, all wanting the same thing, a story to feed the machine. Rick stood, brushing off his jacket. He pulled something from his pocket, a plain white envelope. No name, no logo. He slid it across the table. What's this? An invitation, Rick said. Johnny's people want to see you. Mike frowned. His people? Rick nodded. He's not some clueless actor, Mike. He's got friends, the kind who don't mind making a little noise when the truth needs air. Mike turned the envelope over in his hands. It felt heavier than paper should. What happens if I open this? Rick's smile was thin but real. Then maybe you find out what side you're really on. Mike looked at the door. For a second he thought about tossing it in the trash, blocking the calls, crawling back to some safe job where no one knew his name. But some part of him, the part that stayed behind in that alley when Johnny walked away, wanted to see this through. He slipped the envelope into his pocket. When? Rick's eyes glinted. Tonight. Dress warm. It's not gonna be at a studio. Mike almost laughed. Of course it's not. Outside, the city kept buzzing, headlines growing louder by the hour. Mike Collins, the kid who tried to stay invisible, was about to walk straight into the fire. And this time, he wasn't sure he wanted to come out clean. Mike hadn't opened the envelope until sunset. He sat on the edge of his unmade bed, the city's glow leaking through the blinds as he unfolded the single slip of paper inside. An address, handwritten, no signature. One line at the bottom, no phones. He almost laughed at that. These days, who went anywhere without a phone? But he knew they were right. If he was really going to step into Johnny Depp's hidden world, the part untouched by headlines and bright studio lights, he couldn't bring the leash with him. At 8:45 p.m., Mike stood in front of an old warehouse near the docks. The city's glittering skyline was just a memory here, replaced by rusted fences, puddles of oil-slicked rainwater, and the steady groan of distant ships. A man in a thick black coat waited by the door. No words, just a nod. He held out a battered cigar box. Mike hesitated, then dropped his phone inside. watching the lid snap shut like a secret. The man opened the warehouse door. Inside, warm light spilled across concrete floors and stacks of old crates. It didn't feel like a Hollywood backlit. It felt like a forgotten corner of the city, a place where no one would think to look for movie stars or scandal. Johnny was there, leaning against a scarred wooden table, hat pulled low, a glass of something dark in his hand. He looked up when Mike stepped in, that familiar crooked grin flickering to life. "Told you you'd have to choose," Johnny said. Mike tried to find his voice. "This is yours." Johnny gave a small shrug. "Mine tonight. Used to be a buddy's art studio, before everyone got too famous to need real walls." Mike looked around. A battered couch, a few mismatched chairs, a single old record player humming a blues tune. No cameras, no handlers, just the man and the truth. Johnny pushed off the table, closing the space between them. "They're gonna keep coming for you. For me. For anyone who won't stick to the script." Mike's pulse hammered in his throat. "So what do we do?" Johnny's smile didn't reach his eyes this time. "We give him something else to talk about." Outside, the wind rattled the rusted siding. Inside, two men who should have never met stood ready to rewrite the story. Mike stood frozen for a heartbeat, trying to read the lines in Johnny's face. The exhaustion, the mischief, the strange calm that only people with nothing left to lose seemed to carry. Johnny motioned him to sit. They took the old couch. The springs groaned under them like they were protesting this secret meeting. Johnny poured a second glass from a bottle that looked older than both of them. He handed it to Mike. "To choices," he said, raising his own. Mike hesitated, then clinked their glasses. The drink burned, but in a way that felt good, sharp enough to remind him this was real. Johnny leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know why they're after you, right? Not because you saw me blow up on Fallon." "Not really." Mike wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Then why?" Johnny's grin was tired but honest. "Because you didn't run. Because you stayed. They don't like people who stay when the script goes off the rails." Mike's laugh came out too loud. "So what? I'm your new PR plan." Johnny's eyes flickered with something like sadness, or maybe relief. "No, Mike. You're my proof that I still get to choose who I stand with. And who stands with me." He pulled out a crumpled folder from his coat pocket, dropped it on the coffee table. Mike saw photos, grainy ones, papers stamped confidential, contracts, emails, screenshots with Fallon's name all over them. Johnny tapped the folder. "They didn't just want a goofy interview, Mike. They wanted to twist me into a punchline, a headline that would bury everything else. They nearly pulled it off." Mike flipped through the pages, the words swimming in the low warehouse light. His throat felt dry again. "You want me to help you leak this?" Johnny's grin sharpened. "No, I want you to help me show it. On my terms. No tabloids. No fake outrage. Just the truth. Messy, ugly, real." Mike looked up from the folder. "And if I say no?" Johnny leaned back, lifting his glass again. "Then I'll find someone else. But I hope I don't have to." The warehouse hummed with the quiet promise of a plan that would cost both of them everything, or give them back something they'd lost long ago. Mike sat hunched over the folder, fingertips smudged with dust and ink. Each page felt heavier than the last, a trail of half-buried truths no one was supposed to see. Late-night emails, quiet payouts, a joke that wasn't just a joke, but a push to paint Johnny as unhinged, unpredictable, easy to discard when convenient. Johnny sat silent beside him, swirling the last sip of his drink. He didn't push, didn't plead, just waited. Mike finally let the folder drop onto the battered table. The echo in the empty warehouse made him flinch. "You're asking me to ruin Fallon," Mike said quietly. "He'll say I'm lying. His people will say you're desperate." Johnny's eyes didn't waver. "Maybe I am desperate, but I'm not lying." Mike rubbed his temples. He could already see it. The backlash, the headlines. Bitter nobody turns on TV golden boy. He'd lose any shot at an easy job in the industry. He'd lose the invisible life he'd clung to for so long. But he remembered that night in the alley. The quiet conversation. The way Johnny had looked at him. Not like a nobody, but like someone who mattered. Mike blew out a breath. "If we do this, we do it right. Not some cheap leak that people scroll past. We film it. We show every page. Every word. You tell them yourself." Johnny's mouth twitched into a grin. Tired, but real. "You know how to shoot?" "I know how to listen," Mike said. "And I know how to keep the camera steady when the truth's too heavy to hold." Johnny's laugh was a rasp. That's good enough for me. He stood, draining his glass, then set it down with a soft clink. He reached out, and for a second, Mike just stared at the calloused hand. Then he took it. In that moment, Mike wasn't the invisible guy anymore. He was part of something bigger, messier, riskier, maybe stupid as hell, but real. Johnny's grip was warm, grounding. Get some sleep, kid. Tomorrow, we burn the script. Outside, the wind howled against the rusted siding. Inside, two men sealed a promise that would shatter the story the world thought they knew. Mike stepped out of the warehouse just past midnight, the cold air slicing through his coat like a blade. He walked with the envelope tucked deep in his pocket. The folder stayed with Johnny. It felt safer that way. He kept his head down on the long walk back to his apartment, mind spinning with what they'd agreed to. Every block he crossed felt like stepping deeper into a story he couldn't crawl out of now, even if he tried. Inside his studio, the air was stale. He didn't bother turning on the lights. He just dropped his keys, kicked off his shoes, and sat on the edge of his bed. The quiet was too heavy. He could still hear Johnny's voice, low and certain, echoing in the back of his head. Tomorrow, we burn the script. His phone buzzed in the cigar box he'd brought home. He'd switched it on out of habit, dozens of missed calls, messages from numbers he didn't know. A few from Rick, a few with no caller ID at all. Mike didn't open a single one. He just let the screen go dark again. He thought about what would come next. The camera lights, the raw confession, the ugly truths dragged into the light. And him, the quiet kid behind the lens, suddenly pulled onto the stage. He knew Fallon would fight back, that the networks would spin it, that people would ask, who does this guy think he is? He didn't have an answer. Maybe he'd never have one. All he knew was that Johnny hadn't asked him to fight for fame, or money, or revenge. He'd asked him to fight for the chance to tell the truth, even if no one believed it, even if it broke both of them. Mike lay back on his bed, staring at the cracked ceiling until dawn pushed its weak light through the blinds. He didn't sleep. He didn't need to. Tomorrow, he'd pick up the camera. Tomorrow, the lie would crack open. Tomorrow, the quiet nobody would stand next to a man the world thought they already knew, and show them who he really was. Mike arrived at the old warehouse just after sunrise. The docks were quiet except for the cry of gulls and the hum of distant trucks unloading crates no one asked about. He carried his old camera bag like a shield, fingers drumming against the strap to keep his nerves in check. Inside, Johnny was already waiting. Same coat, same hat, same eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie the business could throw at a man. A single lamp cast long shadows across the concrete floor. No makeup, no handlers, no polished studio set. Just a battered couch and 2 mugs of coffee that steamed in the cold air. Mike unpacked the camera, checked the battery twice, tested the mic. His hands didn't shake, not this time. He set up the tripod, framed the shot, adjusted the focus until Johnny's tired grin came into crisp view. You ready? Mike asked. Johnny gave a soft laugh. I've been ready for 20 years. Mike hit record. Johnny started slow, no script, no spin. He talked about the night on Fallon's show, the jokes that weren't just jokes, the backdoor deals, the promises made to twist his words, to cut his honesty into clickbait for late-night laughs. He opened the folder, page by page. Let the camera catch every signature, every timestamp, every leaked email that painted the truth. A scandal manufactured to keep audiences hooked and headlines fresh. Johnny didn't shout. He didn't rage. He just told it straight. The kind of raw, crooked truth that made Mike's throat close more than once behind the camera. When he finished, there was a silence that felt like church. Johnny leaned back, hands folded, eyes locked on the lens. Whatever happens after this, Johnny said, voice steady. I'd rather lose everything being honest than win another lie. Mike stopped the recording. He knew the second he hit save that there was no going back. They sat for a moment in the cold, 2 men who'd traded safety for truth. Outside, Hollywood still slept for now. But when it woke up, it would have to choose. Keep the script, or finally listen to the parts no one ever lets roll. If you want more raw, untold stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.